They laughed at the farmer's broken truck, but the next day, he arrived in a Lamborghini. Watch his incredible journey from ridicule to triumph. Don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories. The early morning sun barely broke over the horizon as Jack tightened the rusted latch on the side of his truck. It wasn't much, a battered 30-year-old Ford that groaned with every turn of the wheel, but it was all he had. Every dent, every scratch, every stubborn stain told a story of hard work, long nights, and relentless persistence. To Jack, it was more than a truck. It was a loyal companion that had carried him through years of fields, market trips, and personal struggle. As he drove toward the city, the truck rattled and coughed, sending clouds of exhaust into the crisp morning air. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, aware of every bump in the road. He could feel the truck's age in his bones, but he had a routine to keep, and the city needed fresh produce from his farm. When he rolled into the downtown market, the reactions were immediate. The usual crowd of well-dressed businessmen and affluent shoppers eyed him with thinly veiled amusement. He parked, careful not to scrape the worn-out doors against the curb, and stepped out. His boots crunched on the gravel as a group of young men in sleek suits, leaning against a shiny black SUV, pointed and laughed. "Look at that thing. Is that even legal?" One of them snickered, his voice carrying just loud enough for Jack to hear. "Huh, that truck belongs in a museum, not the streets," added another, flicking a disdainful glance at him. Even the vendors across the stalls exchanged glances, whispering under their breath, their faces tight with suppressed smirks. Jack's cheeks flushed slightly, but he refused to react. He'd grown used to this. It wasn't the first time someone mocked his appearance, his old truck, or even the fact that he was just a farmer. He stepped toward his stall and began unpacking crates of fresh vegetables. Carrots with their green tops still vibrant, plum tomatoes, leafy greens that had survived the chill of the early morning. The scent of earth and dew mixed in the air, grounding him. This was his world. This was where he belonged, even if the city's elite saw him as a joke. As he arranged the produce, he overheard more of the whispers. "Seriously, he drives that thing every day? Wonder how long before it falls apart entirely." Jack's hands worked mechanically, peeling away the hurt behind the laughter. He had learned long ago that those who mocked were usually trapped in their own insecurities. They measured life in appearances, not in effort or integrity. And effort was exactly what he had spent decades investing. Years of sweat, days without sleep, and nights in fields under a blanket of stars, dreaming of something bigger than himself. By mid-morning, the market began to fill. Shoppers paid little attention to the group of young elites still snickering in the corner. Jack's produce sold steadily, and a few loyal customers even waved, smiling warmly. These were people who understood value. Not the polished exterior, but the quality of work, the integrity behind it. Yet the laughter lingered in his mind as he packed unsold crates back into the truck. He could still hear their voices, sharp and dismissive. For a moment, a familiar sting of doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if he was just a man in an old truck, struggling to survive, with no chance to rise above? Jack shook his head. No, he had worked too long, too hard, to let a few mocking faces shake his resolve. Every dent in his truck, every scratch on his hands, every early morning spent in the fields was a step toward something he had barely begun to understand himself. His truck was old, yes, but it carried the weight of decades of preparation. And soon, those who laughed would see that preparation in full. The drive home was quiet. Jack's mind raced with plans, calculations, and strategies. He thought about the fields, the innovations he had been quietly testing for years, and the investors who had promised to back him if he proved the viability of his methods. Each turn of the wheel on his rickety truck was a reminder. Patience, persistence, and silent work were more powerful than immediate recognition. As he parked the truck in his barn, Jack looked at it with a mix of fondness and determination. This old vehicle had been with him through storms, droughts, and ridicule. It was a symbol, not of failure, but of resilience. One day, he promised himself, those who mocked him wouldn't just regret their laughter. They would be astonished by the results of his efforts. He stepped into the farmhouse, the scent of warm bread and coffee greeting him, and sat at the wooden table. Notes, sketches, and calculations spread before him. He spent hours planning, analyzing every step of his farm startup, making projections, and refining strategies. He worked quietly, almost obsessively, because he knew the world outside would never understand the magnitude of the work unless he proved it. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Jack went out to the barn again, running his hands over the old truck. He whispered to it, almost as if it were a trusted friend, "One day, they'll see. One day, it won't just be the truck they laugh at." He locked the barn and went inside, a fire of determination burning quietly in his chest. The laughter of the city's elite was still echoing in his mind, but now it fueled him rather than weakened him. Jack understood something crucial. Preparation, perseverance, and silent dedication were invisible weapons. The world could mock him, underestimate him, or ignore him, but soon everything would change. And when it did, he would not just prove them wrong. He would leave them speechless. The morning air was cool and crisp as Jack returned to his farm. The truck groaned as he maneuvered it down the dirt path, but he barely noticed. His mind was already racing with calculations, ideas, and plans. Outwardly, he was just a simple farmer with a broken-down truck, laughed at by the city elite, but behind closed doors, he was building something extraordinary. Jack's barn doubled as a workshop, cluttered with old machinery, crates, and tools. Amid the chaos were his prized possessions: notebooks, blueprints, and prototypes of devices he had been developing for years. While the city mocked his appearance and humble truck, he was quietly experimenting with innovations that could revolutionize farming: automated irrigation systems, lightweight drones to monitor crops, and portable devices to boost soil fertility. His hands moved deftly, assembling a small drone while muttering calculations under his breath. Each circuit, each motor, each piece of wiring represented years of sleepless nights and relentless dedication. Jack had learned to cherish the quiet hours, where no one mocked him and no one doubted his abilities. This was his world, his laboratory, and his proving ground. Despite the long hours and exhausting work, Jack found a strange satisfaction in solitude. The laughter of others had once stung, but now it fueled his resolve. Every insult, every sneer from the city became motivation. They thought he was nothing, but he was building a future that would shock them all. By noon, Jack had completed a test run of one of his drones. It buzzed over the fields with precision, capturing detailed images of crop health and soil moisture. He watched the live feed on his laptop, a smile creeping across his face. This was more than technology. It was the key to transforming his farm and proving the doubters wrong. But Jack knew that ideas alone weren't enough. He needed capital, investors who would believe in his vision. And the city that had laughed at him was exactly where those opportunities lay. He spent the next several days preparing meticulously, crafting a presentation, refining his pitch, and calculating projected profits. Every number was double-checked, every scenario considered. Failure was not an option. Late one evening, after long hours of preparation, Jack leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. The barn was quiet except for the hum of his laptop and the occasional creak of the old structure. He thought about the city, the marketplace, and the people who had laughed at his truck. A fire ignited in him, not of anger, but of determination. They would see what diligence, innovation, and patience could achieve. Finally, the day came when he would meet his first potential investor. Jack dressed carefully, not flashy, but clean and neat, presenting himself as a professional, capable man. His old truck rattled and wheezed as he drove to the city, a stark contrast to the polished cars of those who had mocked him. He didn't flinch. The truck was a symbol of his journey, of every sacrifice, and he carried it with pride. At the office of the investor, Jack was greeted with polite skepticism. The lobby was sleek, marble floors shining under bright lights, a world away from his fields and dirt paths. As he walked in, he could almost feel the judgment of everyone in the room. Here was a farmer with a beaten-up truck and rumpled clothes, daring to pitch a high-tech solution to modern agriculture. "Mr. Jack, we've reviewed your summary," said one investor, raising an eyebrow. "We're intrigued, but you must understand, it's a competitive market. Many ideas fail before they even start." Jack nodded, swallowing the familiar sting of doubt. He began his presentation, walking them through detailed plans, live demonstrations of his drones, and projections that showed clear profitability. His confidence grew with each slide, each demonstration. He could see the surprise creeping into their expressions, a subtle recognition that maybe, just maybe, this unassuming farmer knew what he was doing. Questions came fast and sharp: financials, scalability, potential risks. Jack answered calmly, with clarity, demonstrating not only technical knowledge, but an unshakable understanding of the market. By the end of the meeting, he could sense a shift. The polite skepticism was fading, replaced with cautious excitement. Days later, Jack received the call that would change everything. An investor, impressed by his dedication, innovation, and vision, had agreed to fund the project. The amount was substantial enough to expand operations, buy new equipment, and, more importantly, give him the recognition he had long deserved. That night, Jack returned to his barn, walking past his old truck with a quiet smile. Soon, the world that had laughed at him would see the results of his labor. He spent the next hours mapping out his plans, dreaming not of revenge, but of success, the kind that couldn't be ignored. He imagined driving back into the city, not in the old truck that had become the source of ridicule, but in a vehicle that reflected his hard work and determination. The thought made him grin. They laughed now, yes, but Jack knew the day would come when the tables would turn. And when it did, he would not need to shout, argue, or fight. The success would speak for itself. As the stars glittered above his fields, Jack packed away the night's notes, shutting off the barn lights. The laughter of the city, faint and distant, was no longer a burden. It was fuel. Each mocking word had become a spark, igniting a path to something greater than he had dared imagine. Tomorrow, he told himself, would be the next step, and in the quiet of his barn, Jack allowed himself one fleeting thought. The day would come when those who mocked him would stop laughing, and they would never forget the man who had turned ridicule into triumph. The city streets felt colder that morning, though the sun had risen bright and clear. Jack maneuvered his old truck down the familiar roads, aware of every uneven bump beneath his tires. The laughter had not disappeared. In fact, it seemed louder now. Whispers followed him from the market stalls, from the coffee shops, from the shiny office towers. Still driving that wreck? A man sneered, leaning casually against his polished sports car. Honestly, how does he even get anywhere? Laughed a woman with perfectly manicured nails, pointing at his truck. Jack ignored them, though a twinge of frustration tugged at his chest. It was impossible not to notice. Even some of the vendors who once treated him kindly now exchanged uneasy glances, as if uncertain whether to side with the laughing elites or the humble farmer. Despite the mockery, Jack remained steadfast. Inside him, a fire burned brighter than ever. He had already secured the initial investment, and his prototype drones were ready for the first large-scale tests on his fields. But he knew the hardest battles were still ahead, not in the lab or the fields, but in winning the respect of those who doubted him. The day wore on, and Jack worked tirelessly in the fields, flying drones over the crops, measuring soil moisture, and logging data for his investors. The machines hummed with life, their sensors scanning every inch of the land. To the casual observer, it might have looked like ordinary farming. But each movement, each calculation, was part of a larger plan, a quiet rebellion against the ridicule he had endured for years. As afternoon approached, a group of city elites appeared at the edge of the field. They had driven in their luxury cars, leaning on their SUVs, smirking as they watched Jack at work. Among them were the same faces from the market: Tom, Lucas, and a few others who had never missed a chance to mock his truck or comment on his supposed incompetence. "Look at him, still pretending that old thing can do anything," Tom said, shaking his head. "Maybe he thinks these drones will fix the truck too," Lucas snorted. Jack did not respond. He simply continued his work, the sun casting long shadows over the golden fields. He felt their eyes, their laughter, their judgment, but he did not falter. Instead, he let his results speak silently. Each drone flight, each measurement, Each adjustment demonstrated a competence they could not begin to comprehend. As the sun dipped lower, Jack noticed something remarkable. One of the drones had detected a problem in the irrigation system, something no human eye could have caught. He quickly corrected it, preventing what could have been a significant loss in crop yield. The elites watched in stunned silence, their amusement faltering as the technology they had mocked displayed undeniable results. By evening, Jack returned to his barn, wiping sweat from his brow. He finally allowed himself a small smile. The laughter of the city had followed him all day, but he had not lost focus, not once. The proof was in the work, the results, the undeniable effectiveness of what he had built. Still, the pressure did not relent. Neighbors whispered rumors, questioning how a simple farmer could suddenly command such technology. Even some of his closest allies expressed doubt, worried that the public humiliation he endured might outweigh the respect he was beginning to earn. Jack listened, considered their concerns, but ultimately chose to focus on his path forward. That night, he sat in the barn, reviewing every calculation, every flight log, every data point collected during the day. The stakes were higher than ever. A single mistake could undermine months of preparation, giving his detractors fresh ammunition. But Jack had learned long ago that the world would only notice results, not intentions. He closed his laptop and looked around the barn. The tools, the drones, the old truck, they were all symbols of perseverance. The laughter of others was now a distant echo, powerless against the momentum he had built. Jack's mind, sharp and focused, plotted the next steps, expanding the drone tests, refining the technology, preparing for the next investor meeting. Every action was deliberate, every choice a move closer to proving himself. As he stepped outside, the moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the fields. Jack paused, breathing in the cool night air. The city that had laughed at him, the people who had doubted him, the mockers who had sneered at his truck, they would all witness the transformation soon enough. Not through words or confrontation, but through undeniable achievement. He returned to his small cabin, exhausted but resolute. In his heart, he carried a single truth: ridicule could never defeat determination. Mockery could never erase years of effort. And the day would come when those who laugh would have to look him in the eye and see the proof of his persistence, his skill, and his vision. Jack drifted asleep with a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow, the work would continue. The drones would fly, the fields would flourish, and the laughter of the city would grow quieter, replaced by something far more potent: recognition. He knew that one day, very soon, the old truck would be a relic of the past, and his hard work would speak for itself. But for now, he rested. The pressure remained, the mockery persisted, and the city continued to underestimate him. Yet Jack smiled in the darkness, confident that every challenge, every laugh, every doubt would only make the eventual triumph that much sweeter. The morning air was heavy with anticipation as Jack drove his battered truck into the city. Today was not just another day. Today was the first critical meeting with potential investors who could transform his farm into a technological powerhouse. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, listening to the familiar rattle of the engine beneath him. Each groan and creak of the old truck reminded him of how far he had come and how much work still lay ahead. Arriving at the sleek glass building, Jack parked as carefully as ever. The contrast between his truck and the polished cars surrounding it was stark. Yet he felt no embarrassment, only determination. The laughter and sneers from the market faded into memory as he stepped into the elevator, heading for the top floor. The meeting room was pristine, all gleaming surfaces and precise angles. Investors sat with folded arms, eyebrows raised in polite skepticism, their expressions betraying curiosity mixed with doubt. Jack set up his laptop and drones, his hands steady despite the pounding of his heart. He began his presentation with clarity and quiet confidence. "Gentlemen," he started, "what I'm showing you today isn't just about technology. It's about maximizing efficiency, protecting crops, and ensuring farmers thrive. What I have developed is a system that can monitor fields in real time, detect issues before they become problems, and optimize yields with precision." He launched the first drone, and it hummed to life, gliding smoothly over a mock field display set up in the room. The investors watched as the live feed appeared on the screen, showing detailed maps of soil moisture, crop health, and even minute variations in plant growth. Each demonstration revealed a layer of insight that traditional methods could never achieve. One investor raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And you believe this will scale effectively? How can one farmer manage all of this?" Jack smiled calmly. "The beauty of this system is its scalability. It's designed to empower multiple farms, allowing a single operator to monitor vast areas efficiently. The technology adapts to different terrains and crop types, making it versatile and cost-effective." Questions came rapidly, probing finances, operational logistics, and potential risks. Jack answered each one with precision, his knowledge of both technology and farming giving him a unique authority. He detailed cost projections, anticipated market demand, and contingency plans. By the end of the session, the polite skepticism had begun to waver, replaced by genuine interest and excitement. After what felt like hours, the lead investor leaned back in his chair. "I must admit," he said, "I didn't expect much walking in. But you've proven not only the viability of your technology, but your understanding of its real-world application. I believe in this. We'll fund your project." Jack's heart surged with relief and triumph. This was the breakthrough he had worked for, proof that his efforts, his patience, and his resilience were paying off. He thanked them with genuine humility, fully aware that this was only the beginning. Returning to his barn that evening, Jack reflected on the day's events. The old truck had carried him to this moment, and though it remained battered and unreliable, it symbolized years of perseverance. He looked at the drones, the blueprints, the countless hours of work, and allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He had won his first battle, but victory brought its own challenges. Expanding operations required careful planning, additional resources, and constant vigilance. Jack spent nights reviewing data, coordinating shipments of equipment, and ensuring every drone functioned flawlessly. Each minor setback, a malfunctioning motor, a delayed shipment, or an unexpected software glitch, was met with determination rather than despair. Meanwhile, the city's mockers were not idle. Rumors of Jack's success began to circulate, met with disbelief and whispered attempts to discredit him. Some continued to scoff openly, claiming it was a fluke or a lucky break. Jack ignored them. He knew that true validation would come not from words, but from consistent results, and he intended to let the work speak louder than any laughter. Over the following weeks, the farm transformed. Fields once monitored by hand alone now thrummed with the quiet efficiency of drones and automated systems. Jack's produce thrived like never before, yielding higher quality crops with less waste. Orders increased, contracts with distributors multiplied, and word spread of the innovative farmer who was quietly revolutionizing agriculture. The mockery that had once defined his city interactions grew quieter, replaced by curiosity, and in some cases, reluctant admiration. People began to ask questions, observe his methods, and even attempt to learn from his techniques. Jack welcomed this quietly, seeing opportunity in their interest rather than resentment in their envy. Yet, despite this progress, Jack never forgot the old truck. It remained a fixture in the barn, a tangible reminder of humility, hard work, and the journey that had brought him here. Each dent and scratch told a story of ridicule endured, of obstacles overcome, and of nights spent working when the world slept. One evening, as he prepared for a crucial investor review, Jack paused outside the barn. The stars were bright above, the hum of the field's automated systems a soft symphony in the background. He imagined the city streets, the market, and the mocking faces he had endured. Soon, those faces would change, not through confrontation, but through undeniable proof of his success. And in that moment, Jack allowed himself to dream further. Beyond the farm, beyond the contracts, beyond the initial victory. He envisioned a day when he would return to the city streets, not in his battered old truck, but in a vehicle worthy of his hard work, a silent testament to perseverance and triumph. The fire of ambition, once kindled in the shadow of mockery, now burned brighter than ever. Jack knew the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but he also knew that he had the resilience, intellect, and determination to see it through. The first victory was behind him, but the journey had only just begun. And as he finally turned off the lights in the barn and stepped inside the farmhouse, Jack whispered to himself, "Let them laugh now. Soon, they'll witness the results of every ounce of effort I've poured into this dream." The city had not changed, at least not at first glance. Its streets gleamed in the morning sun, cars zipped past, and pedestrians moved with their usual hurried purpose. Yet, today, Jack's return would alter the rhythm of the familiar streets. Gone was the old, rattling truck. Instead, a sleek black Lamborghini purred along the asphalt, its engine a smooth contrast to the groans of his former vehicle. Jack maneuvered the car carefully, conscious of every turn. He had spent weeks ensuring that his technology and business plans were in place, but this moment, the silent re-entry into the city that had mocked him, felt monumental. He could feel eyes turning as he passed. Whispers began to ripple through the sidewalks, building from curiosity to disbelief. "Is that?" a man asked, shielding his eyes against the sun. "No way. That's him," exclaimed a woman, pointing toward the Lamborghini as it glided past the market stalls. The same group of young elites who had laughed at his truck days ago stood by the curb, mouths agape, their expressions frozen in shock. Tom and Lucas, the loudest of the mockers, exchanged glances, disbelief and regret warring in their eyes. Jack smiled faintly, not in arrogance, but in quiet satisfaction. He parked the car in front of the old market, where he had once set up his humble stall. The contrast between the sleek lines of his Lamborghini and the worn pavement was stark, yet the message was clear: diligence, innovation, and persistence had their reward. As he stepped out, onlookers crowded closer, some whispering, others outright staring. The city, once filled with ridicule, was now filled with awe. Jack walked toward his old market stall, carrying nothing but a briefcase, his posture calm and assured. There was no need for words. The evidence of his success was written in every inch of his presence. Tom, still leaning against his SUV, finally broke the stunned silence. "Ow, how did he do it?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lucas shook his head, speechless. I can't believe this." Jack overheard, but remained composed. He approached his former mockers, hands relaxed at his sides. "Good morning," he said simply, his tone neutral, almost gentle. "I see some of you remember me." Tom and Lucas fumbled for words, their previous confidence evaporating. They had laughed without thought, without understanding, and now faced the tangible proof of Jack's vision and effort. Jack continued calmly, addressing the growing crowd. "This truck," he gestured toward the old, rickety Ford parked nearby, "was the vehicle of my journey, not my destination. Every dent, every scratch, every groan of its engine reminds me of the effort, patience, and perseverance it took to reach this moment." Murmurs ran through the crowd. People leaned closer, some nodding, others whispering, the atmosphere shifting from disbelief to respect. The very streets that had once been the stage for ridicule now bore witness to achievement. "I never sought to prove anyone wrong," Jack continued, his eyes sweeping across the faces that had doubted him. "I only sought to prove myself, and in doing so, I hope to inspire others to pursue their dreams, no matter the laughter or doubt along the way." The elites, silenced and humbled, finally understood that mockery had no power over those with vision, resilience, and determination. Jack's presence alone conveyed the lesson. He did not need to boast. His Lamborghini, his successful ventures, and his confident demeanor spoke louder than any words could. As Jack walked past the market stalls, some vendors nodded respectfully. Others who had once whispered and pointed now regarded him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. The city's perception had shifted. He was no longer the farmer to be mocked. He was a figure of accomplishment, a man who had taken ridicule and transformed it into triumph. Later that afternoon, Jack returned to the office building where he had first met his investors. The receptionists, the staff, even the janitors, all familiar faces, looked up in surprise as he entered with ease and quiet confidence. Jack's work was not just recognized in numbers and contracts. It was recognized in respect, in acknowledgement, in the subtle nods of people who now understood what it meant to persevere. As he left the building, Jack allowed himself a small, private smile. The city that had once laughed at his old truck would remember this day. It was a day that marked a turning point, a day that proved success is not born from arrogance, but from persistence, innovation, and belief in oneself. He returned to his Lamborghini, the sleek black curves reflecting the afternoon sun. Jack knew the journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, new goals to achieve, and opportunities to expand his vision. But in this moment, the victory was complete. The ridicule had ended, replaced by acknowledgement and awe. And as Jack drove away, leaving whispers and astonished glances behind him, he allowed one thought to settle in his mind. The world had laughed at the farmer, yes, but tomorrow it would learn from him. The city had changed, not in its streets or buildings, but in the eyes of its people. Jack's return on the sleek black Lamborghini had left ripples of astonishment, whispers of respect, and an undeniable sense of awe. Yet for Jack, the real triumph was not in the car, nor the envy it sparked, but in the journey that had brought him here. That morning, Jack arrived at his farm, now transformed into a hub of innovation. Drones hovered above the fields, systematically analyzing soil and crop health. Automated irrigation systems hummed quietly, ensuring that every plant received exactly what it needed. Workers, trained in the latest techniques, moved with precision, guided by the technology Jack had tirelessly developed. He walked among the fields, feeling the soft earth under his boots, inhaling the clean scent of growth and progress. The farm was no longer just a patch of land. It was a testament to vision, dedication, and relentless effort. Each successful harvest, each data point collected by his drones, and every contract signed with distributors symbolized the culmination of years of hard work. Jack paused to watch a new batch of drones launch into the sky. Their synchronized movement was mesmerizing, a visual representation of order, efficiency, and innovation. He remembered the countless nights spent alone in the barn, tinkering with prototypes, testing software, and perfecting flight paths. All the mockery, the doubts, and the ridicule had been fuel for this moment. His thoughts drifted back to the city, to the faces that had once laughed at him. Tom, Lucas, and their peers had underestimated him, dismissing his truck as a symbol of failure. But Jack's victory was silent, profound, and unshakable. He had not sought revenge. He had sought excellence, and the results spoke louder than any words ever could. In the afternoon, Jack hosted a small gathering of his closest allies, investors, and employees. He shared the story of his journey, not with boastfulness, but with humility and insight. He spoke of the failures, the long nights, the moments of doubt, and the perseverance that had carried him forward. The room was captivated not just by his achievements, but by the character and resolve that had forged them. One of the investors leaned forward. "Jack, your work has transformed not only your farm, but the industry. What advice would you give to those who are mocked, underestimated, or doubted?" Jack smiled thoughtfully. "Don't let laughter define your path. Use it as fuel. Work quietly, persistently, and passionately. Let your results speak for themselves. Success is the ultimate response to skepticism." The crowd nodded in agreement, absorbing the wisdom earned through years of silent labor. Outside, the city continued its daily rhythm, unaware that the lessons of perseverance were now subtly altering the perception of one determined farmer. Later that evening, Jack returned to the barn. The old truck, once the object of ridicule, sat quietly in the corner. He ran his hand along its worn surface, feeling the memories embedded in every dent and scratch. It had carried him through mockery, doubt, and struggle, and now it stood as a symbol of humility and resilience. Jack climbed into his Lamborghini for a short drive, cruising along the city streets with a sense of calm accomplishment. People recognized him now, some waving, others simply watching in silent acknowledgement. The world had shifted its perception, not because he had sought to prove them wrong, but because he had proven himself right. Reflecting on the journey, Jack realized that true victory was never about material success or public recognition. It was about integrity, perseverance, and staying committed to one's vision despite ridicule and doubt. The Lamborghini, the flourishing farm, and the investments were merely tangible markers of deeper truth. He had never allowed laughter to define his potential. That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Jack sat on the porch of his farmhouse. The gentle hum of the farm's automation provided a comforting rhythm. He sipped coffee, savoring the quiet satisfaction of a dream realized through relentless effort. In the distance, he could imagine the city lights, flickering reminders of a place that had once doubted him. Now, those lights symbolized recognition, respect, and the undeniable power of persistence. Jack leaned back, closing his eyes. He thought of all the farmers who struggled quietly, overlooked, and underestimated. He had become an example, not through arrogance, but through results. His journey was a beacon, a story to inspire others to pursue their dreams, no matter the ridicule they might face along the way. And in that quiet reflection, Jack made a vow to continue innovating, to continue growing, and to help others achieve their potential. The city's laughter was now a distant memory, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing that dedication, resilience, and vision had conquered doubt. Jack finally stood, stretching under the moonlight. He walked past the barn and the old truck one last time, appreciating the journey it represented. He knew that the laughter of the past would fade completely, replaced by the legacy of a man who had turned mockery into motivation, persistence into triumph, and vision into reality. As he looked toward the horizon, Jack allowed himself a confident smile. The road ahead remained full of challenges and opportunities, but he was ready. The farmer who had once been laughed at had become a symbol of success, perseverance, and the quiet power of unwavering determination. And with that, Jack stepped back into the present, ready to embrace the next chapter of his journey, one defined not by ridicule, but by the results of his hard work, intelligence, and unshakable resolve.